Happy Father's Day. It's amazing the impact that a dad can have on the life of the kids. And as we start out today, many of you may remember a song by Harry Chapman called The Cat in the Cradle. The song was actually written by Harry Chapman when he had his son. And as he was looking down at the face of the child, ultimately this song came to his mind. And, for those who know the song, I'm sure that it may resonate, with you, on some levels. The song, is telling of a dad whose life is so busy that he doesn't take the time to be with his kids. And ultimately what ends up happening in that song is that the son is idolizing the traits of the father, and he takes those same traits on later in his life. And later when things slow down, that dad is looking to have that relationship, to have that time with the son, but now the son is doing the same thing. And as we think about that song, I just want to point out the chorus here. It says, "And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. When are you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll be together then. I know we'll have a good time then." And as we look at this song, I really believe that Harry Chapman was trying, to reflect. I believe that he was reflecting, and I believe this song has caused many of us to reflect as well about what is our priorities. What is most important to us? Are we taking the time for that we say is truly a priority? Because ultimately, as we all know, that the things that we put our time and our energy and our efforts in is the most important things in our lives. And as we take a look, there's many sayings regarding time, such as that time is fleeting. As we take a look, especially as we continue to get older and older and older, I think as a child, just how long it took for Christmas to come. And now as an adult, and I think even more as we continue to age, how fast you're just like, well, it's Christmas already? You follow what I'm saying? Who would have thought we'd already be in June right now? It doesn't seem like we're hardly into the year. But yet time continues ticking. Time moves on whether we're ready for it or not. As the scripture says, as Sandy had read in our text this morning, there is time for everything. And again, I'd like to go there. We're actually going to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. If you have a paper copy, if you have your Bibles there, please open the scriptures up. If you don't have a paper copy, pull it up on your tablet, on your phone, what have you. There is power in seeing the word in your own hands. Please follow along with me. Again, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1. It says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What profit has the worker from that in which he labors? I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time, and he has put eternity into their hearts, except that no one can find the work that God has done from the beginning to the end. As we consider this text, I believe that there is so much. I think Solomon, in all of his wisdom, as he's looking back at his life and seeing how the changes go in terms of his walk with God, has a lot to reflect on, and I believe that there's a lot for us there. As he says in the very first verse, it says that to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose. And how true is that? We recognize that there are limitations. We recognize how life affects us and the things play into how we perceive life and how we approach things. I mean, we all know that everything that we experience and do in life all has a start time and an end time. Everything. Whether we're talking about an experience, whether we're talking about a relationship, whether we're talking about life in and of itself, everything has a beginning and an end. As we think again about what Solomon says here, we're able to see that there are various stages and phases in a person's life. And I mean, just even looking across this congregation, we do have people in every stage of life. There is, as he says, a time to work and a time to play. And I'm sure that we would all prefer to laugh rather than the time for sorrow and mourning. But each of these experiences, each of these things ultimately change who we are. It helps us to become the people that we are, and God allows us to be able to go through different things for the good and the bad to help us to grow into the people that He's called us to be. There truly is time for everything. As we take a look in verse 3, it says, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It is the gift of God. Work is to be a good thing. And as we look at this, I mean, eating and drinking is necessary. If we don't have something to eat, something to drink, we cannot be sustained. But as we look at it, work is equally as important because it is through work that God helps us to experience things, but it also keeps us out of the devil's hands. We've all heard the saying, an empty mind is the devil's playground. As we take a look at this text, it goes on talking about labor, that it is the gift of God. And it's fascinating because as we consider this, it's not talking about just work, but it's talking about labor that we're able to do in His name, in His service. We're talking about things that we can do even that bring worship to our Father in heaven. It is to be a pleasure for us. Again, it is the gift of God that these things are given to help us to stay focused on Him and the things that we need to keep track on. So again, my question is if there's a time for everything, how should we spend our time? How do we answer that question? And as we go back again to verse 11, it says that He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from the beginning to the end. God has given us, as it says here, He's given us beauty and He's given us love. As we're able to think about these things, we're able to see everything that He has done for us is as an expression of His love. He has created beautiful things for our enjoyment and ultimately to draw us closer to Him. As we think about this, we have so much going on here in Grand Junction. I mean, think about it. You can go hiking in countless numbers of trails and see different things all the time. We're able to go other places and we're able to hit so many national parks literally within a matter of 4, 5, 6 hours. We are able to enjoy some of the best scenery here in this country. How many times have you found yourself when you're out there going for a hike, as you're doing whatever you're doing, maybe even a drive through some mountain pass on the way to somewhere, that you just pause for a second and you're like, wow, that is beautiful. Have we all been touched by that? And that is just a glimpse. Everywhere across the world, there are places that you almost lose your breath seeing the beauty that God has given us. And I believe that God has given us things that are beautiful even to make the time that He has set aside to be with us, the Sabbath day, special as well. As we take a look, we're able to see that God makes beautiful things. But now as we take a look back to the text, it says that He has put eternity into their hearts. I mean, as we think about this, how hard is it to say goodbye when somebody passes? A loved one. It's very hard. We struggle with these things, and we miss that person, and it can be even for the rest of our life. Sometimes the loss of a loved one can affect us literally till the moment that we end up dying ourselves. We're not meant to die. We are meant to live and to live for all of eternity. We are meant to be with God, not just here and now, not just glimpses of Him from time to time, but continually. I mean, think about that. How many times have you sat back and just tried to picture, tried to imagine what heaven is going to be like? I remember talking to one person one time, and this little child said, I don't know if I want to go to heaven. And I said, why is that? I think I'd get bored. Forever is an awful long time. I mean, it was cute. But the thing is it is so far beyond anything that we can imagine. Heaven is so much greater than anything we are able to experience now. It is going to be a joy and a pleasure. It is something we look forward to. There are so many Bible verses that we cling to, speaking of the promises of what is yet to come. We are made to last forever. But now I want you to think a little bit about, what this is really looking like. Now, as we take a look here, again, it's that He's given us eternity in our hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from the beginning to the end. I mean, as we think about this is an invitation from Jesus Himself offering us to come to Him and study. So often we like to quote the text in Isaiah that says, come together, let us reason. And the thing is that's not actually talking about that. What that is talking about is an invitation that God is giving us to come to Him so we can understand Him in a fuller and deeper way, that we can have that relationship with Him, because in that relationship we are changed. We have all heard the saying, what you behold, you become. And we know this to be true. We know that the things that we are engaging in and the things that we are focusing on ultimately end up ruling over our lives. Just a couple nights ago, I was taking the dog for a walk after I got home for the evening. And, excuse me, part of me wanted to just listen to a podcast and kind of tune out, to be able to listen to some of the news of the day and probably get aggravated, because most of the news seems to do that to people. But I felt a conviction that I needed to listen to the scriptures instead. And as I was going through, it was almost like God had set it up for those very verses to come to my mind. To be able to hear those things, and all of a sudden I was thinking about other things and putting things together and looking at the context, and all of a sudden, it was just such a blessing to be able to have that 45 minutes with Jesus. There was actually a couple of times that I just stopped even playing it as I was just thinking about those words. And it was amazing how God inspired me through the scriptures to even reach out to a couple of you. Since I know that you had your phones on sleep mode, I sent you a message at 11 o'clock at night. But God works in funny ways. What we behold, we become. The time that we take, whether it's for the things of the world or the things of God, change who we are. As we take a look, again, God is calling us to study, to spend the time, to be able to have that relationship with Him. He wants us to look into thinking about who He is. And the more time that we spend thinking about who He is, the more time He changes us. I want you to go to Psalm chapter 1 as we take a look at these next couple passages. Psalm chapter 1, it says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And His law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted in the rivers of water, that brings forth fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. Now, I'm not talking about the prosperity gospel, my friends. God is able to bless us in a whole host of ways, whether it's financially or, I think, even more important, in many other ways of life. As we think about this text, notice what it says here. As we thinking, a lot of times we like to go to the promises. We go to, how is it impacting me? But I want you to take a look at the first two lines on this slide. Let's take a look here. It says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in his law he meditates day and night. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that I haven't spent any time looking over and meditating and thinking on the penal code. Maybe you have. I don't think that's what we're talking about. As we look to the Ten Commandments, as we look to, as Jesus condensed it down, what is the greatest commandment? To love God and to love man. All of this hangs all of the laws and prophets. As we look to what we are seeing in this, we're able to see who God is. We understand what his character is. We're able to get a glimpse into who he is. As we look to the scriptures, we're able to get to a deeper knowledge and understanding. We're able to see what he was like from the beginning all the way through, from everlasting to everlasting. As we're able to spend this time focusing on him, he continues to reveal his character. He reveals to us the foundation of all of heaven, really even the foundation of this very planet. As we consider who he is, the process of sanctification comes. He continues to change us. Again, what you behold, you become, and you will be changed. As we look to the scriptures, he is able to provide fruit for us. And I'm not just talking about the fruit that Marty was talking about a little earlier, even though some of that looked pretty good, did it not? I was looking at some of those blackberries thinking, oh boy. But he provides fruit, spiritual fruit. The fruit that we find in Galatians chapter 5. The fruit that helps us to be able to minister to one another. The fruit that changes our life. Now, as we think about this, we're able to see a little bit more about how God is looking to prosper us, as the scriptures say. We're able to be prospered not only in the wealth, not only in what our bank account says, not only in our 401k, not only by the titles in which we have in our professional lives. We are able to be prospered by knowing him, and by him changing us, by him making us into his image and honor, by making us into that light that is to be on top of the hill shining over, to make us into one that when people look to us, they see Jesus. That is the most important thing. Because so often we want to be in the world and we want to be of God, and sometimes we don't know which way to go. I think of the story, I'm sure many of you have heard it before, that there was a 4-lane road and the 2 lanes that were going in the one direction, the one in the middle could go straight or it could go left. There was one car in that one sitting at the stoplight. In the right lane, you can either turn right or go straight. And there were tons of cars in there, literally going back like 2 city blocks. And as the person was coming up, they're in a hurry. They need to get going. He sees the line of cars, and he sees the one other one that didn't have their blinker on. He thought, I'm going to see if I can't cut up here and cut over in front of everyone else and get down there, because I'm in a hurry. We're always in a hurry. But as that light turned green, the person in front, the one car, pulled ahead about a foot, puts on the blinker. Car is going. The light turns red. The car in front didn't do what almost every car does when they're sitting at a red light and turn anyway. They waited. The person in that car is just getting infuriated, gets out of the car, goes up to the window, and starts chewing them a new one for not going. As he was going back to his car, he noticed the policeman happened to pull up behind him. When they did actually be able to go through the lights, the policeman flips his lights on, pulls him over. He's thinking, what did I do? Why am I getting pulled over? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sitting here at a light. Police officer comes up, license and proof of insurance, please. And he checks him out and goes back to the car. Okay, he doesn't have a warrant. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, officer, what did I do wrong? And he said, I thought it was a stolen vehicle. Because you have the WWJD, what would Jesus do, bumper sticker plus the Christian fish. Christian wouldn't do that, what you did to that person. It hits you. If we spend the time with Jesus, if we delight in his law, if we spend that time meditating, not only just that couple minutes in the morning, and I think we've all done this before. I know that I have done it myself, where I just wanted to check that morning devotions box so I can get on with my day. And when that happens, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one, but you're not thinking about what God had shared with you that morning. You're not thinking about what you had prayed about. You're too busy doing everything else. Through this, God is able to change us. It is his good pleasure to be able to give us the Sabbath day, that we have a day that we don't have to worry about anything else, that we can spend time with him and that we can spend time with the loved ones that he's given us, that we can spend time enjoying what he has shared with us. You know, in fact, and I'm going to do another message on this sometime coming up, but it actually tells us in the scriptures that it is through the Sabbath that we are sanctified. Not in a legalistic kind of way, not in a, okay, here, it's almost Sabbath, so I guess I better get back from the store. Not, okay, we got 5 more minutes and then I can watch what I really want to watch. It's the experience of being in his presence for that time. It's when the Sabbath gets over and you say, that was so great. I can't wait till next week when we can do it again. What you behold, you become. How are you using your time? Take a look here in Psalm chapter 8, verse 1. It says, O Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who have set your glory above the heavens. I mean, this is not just something that people just say. I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody be just like, saying this. I don't think I've ever been anywhere that people just break out in conversation like this. You know, but as I think about this text, I'm thinking about in Isaiah chapter 6, as it's describing God sitting on his throne. As it says, not only is his glory filling the throne room, not as only is his glory filling all of heaven, but it spills down here and fills the earth. How can you experience that if we don't take the time? We have to take the time. As we consider how much evidence of God's glory there is, I don't know how anyone can deny it. I mean, let's just think about the human body just for a moment. I mean, we can point to tons of things throughout the natural world, but look at the human body for a moment. If anything was out of place or out of alignment in our terms of our eyes, we would be blind. As we think about the electrical systems and all of the stuff that happens with the heart, if that goes out of rhythm, even for a minute, you're finding yourself in the hospital. You can't evolve. God made us the way that we did, or that he did, in his honor, is his image. And he is calling us back to that relationship. You know, as we continue on thinking about this text here, we're able to go even further than that and just seeing how the Holy Spirit is remaking us in his image, and he is guaranteeing us salvation. And you have all seen that in people before, where we see kind of what they were BC, before Christ, and then we see who they turn into as Jesus grabs them and touches them. And in fact, we're celebrating that today with Daniel and Jackie's baptism coming up in just a couple of hours. God has been working in their lives. And they are rededicating their life to him. As we take a look at what Paul writes to the church in Philippi, Philippians chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, it says, I implore Euodia, and I implore Syntyche, or something like that, to be of the same mind in the Lord. And I urge you also, true companion, help these women who labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. I mean, as we're thinking about these things, notice what it is that God is trying to say through Paul as he writes this. He's imploring not only these people, but I believe he's imploring all of us into that same relationship. He is calling for all of us to be able to take that time and to serve him. He is calling for all of us to be able to focus on Jesus, so our name is written in the book of life. He's looking for a unity within the fellowship of believers. Not for the sake of unity, but for the sake of ministry, the sake of worship, the sake of doing what he's called us to do. As we go a little bit further in verses 4 through 7, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men, but the Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ." As we think about these things, notice the importance of the interaction with God. Now, this is something I think is huge. I'm just going to flip back for a second here. Notice it's telling us, it says, be anxious for nothing. Has anybody ever been anxious before? We all have. We all have. And maybe we even are right now about one thing or another. But notice how God is actually giving the solution to anxiety right here through this text. As we take a look here, what we're seeing is the answer. Now, please don't get me wrong, my friends. I'm not going to say that, well, if we just say, "Dear Jesus," and then all of a sudden everything gets better just like that and everything is gone. I'm not saying that because sometimes he brings us through the fire to be able to experience what he has for us. But now, as we take a look at this text, notice what he is saying. If you have anxiety, if you are anxious, he is telling us to pray. Pray, pray, and pray some more. Bring your supplications before the throne of grace. Focus on him. Regardless of what's going on, regardless of how bad it is, bring your thanksgiving. Be grateful for those opportunities. Now, I don't know. I'm sure that it's probably happened before, but I don't think I've ever found someone and be like, "Yes, I lost my job today." I don't think I've heard that. Or, "Yes, my spouse died." I know I haven't heard that. But do you think God's able to work through the pain? Do you think he has a plan? He does. Be thankful, even in all things. We are to let our requests be made known. But notice the last part. Guard your heart and mind. Because the thing is there's so many distractions. There's so many distractions. The devil wants to keep us busy with stuff. The devil wants to keep us divided with politics. The devil wants to do anything to bring division and disharmony across the planet, but even more so in the body of believers, and even more so within us as individuals. Focus on Jesus. Let's continue on here. Verse 8, it says, "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you." As we take a look at this text, we're able to see something very powerful, very strong of what God has for us. How much pain would we not experience? How much sorrow, how much trouble, how much anxiety would we not have to participate in if we kept our focus on these very things? Focusing on the things that are right, the things that are just. I mean, just as an example, again, I don't want to, what I just told you about listening to the scriptures as I was taking the dog for a walk, which is one of my normal practices. It would have been very easy for me to get caught into that podcast that I was going to listen to. And I know for a fact, and again, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who deals with this, but I know that when I start looking to the news, as I start looking to these other things, because yes, it is good for us to know what is going on, but there needs to be a line that we stop at. Because it is so easy to get so distracted that when we keep our eyes on that, we are missing the things that we are supposed to draw our attention to. We miss the blessings that God has for us. We miss on so many opportunities because our focus, is not on the things of heaven, but the things of the world. Again, meditate on these things. Why? Because they point to the promises of what's to come. How many times do you look through the scriptures and you find a promise of Christ coming? That you find a promise of Christ sanctifying us and forgiving us our sins, of removing us from those troubles. How many times can you look to the scriptures to find comfort for the things that are not only coming, but for when we lose someone? How many times are we better off to think about what is yet to come? We look forward to the day that Jesus comes in the clouds of glory. We look forward to the day that he establishes his kingdom here on this planet and remakes everything the way that it was supposed to be from the beginning. We look forward to these very things. My friends, in closing, we all have choices. We all have choices of how we will use our time. We all have choices of what it is that we are going to keep our focus on, whether it's the things of the world or the things of God, because you can't have both. Either way, it comes down to a choice that only we can make, and that choice reveals what is important, what that focus is. Just like in that song, he didn't have time for his son, and he missed out. Don't miss out on that time with God, so you miss out. How do you use your time? Is it drawing you and your family closer to God, or is it pulling you away? I was going to ask you this question, and we'll sing our closing song. What in your life needs to be given up to draw closer to him?